Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone around the world. Welcome to the FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup 2022 qualifying tournament draw. Today marks an important milestone on the road to Sydney, as we'll find out the fate of the 16 teams competing at the World Cup qualifying tournaments in February 2022. They all want to compete for this. This is the spectacular new FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup trophy, and will soon be a step closer to knowing who will lift it in Sydney, Australia. The FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup has a long history and has given us stories of inspiration, teamwork, passion, diversity, and national pride. And there's no doubt that these qualifying tournaments, being played for the first time, will provide us with even more special moments. To tell us more, we're pleased to welcome FIBA Secretary General Andreas Saglis. But before we do, let's take a quick trip to Sydney, Australia.
We have walked this land for a long time. We know its heart. We know what brings us together. We know how far we've gone, and we're sure of how far we can go. Unity is not just a word here. It's not just a spirit in this sport. It's the way we all move. We are proud of our art, country, family, language, and culture. We are united by basketball. Australia is ready. Sydney is ready. We are ready.
Welcome to FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup 2022.
Welcome to all basketball fans around the world watching today's draw, an important milestone on the road to Sydney, Australia. The qualifying tournaments for the FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup 2022 are a new and integral component of the women's competition system that came into effect just 2 years ago, in line with FIBA's strategic priority pillar, Women in Basketball. The objective is clear: to provide more meaningful and regular official games to female national teams, to provide more opportunities for female coaches and officials, and of course, to grow the number of fans consuming women's basketball, all things which are important to FIBA. We're excited to have these tournaments being hosted across 3 strong basketball nations. On behalf of the FIBA Central Board, I would like to thank the Serbian Basketball Federation, the Japan Basketball Association, and USA Basketball for hosting these tournaments. Serbia, the current European champions, has been host to numerous FIBA competitions, most recently the qualifying tournaments to the FIBA Olympic tournaments of men and women in Tokyo 2020, and has always delivered excellent events. Our friends in Japan have just hosted a successful Olympic Games under the most difficult circumstances of the pandemic, where their national team still achieved its best ever result with a silver medal. And we are very confident that USA Basketball will put on a great show in the capital city of Washington, D.C., where the Olympic champions USA women's team will play official games on home soil for the first time since Atlanta 1996. So, in February 2022, these qualifying tournaments will provide us with top-level basketball and special memories. We're all excited to see which teams will claim their ticket to the FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup 2022 in Sydney, Australia. Best of luck to all participating teams. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saglis. Joining us also today is our very special guest, a player who has given a role for our country and recently announced her retirement from a long and successful career. She has a long list of achievements, the most recent being FIBA Eurobasket 2021 champion and TISO MVP. She also helped Serbia reach the semifinals at the Olympic Games in Tokyo and has just joined the Serbian Olympic Committee as their new sports director. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Sonja Vasic.
Hard to the basket and it's good.
And the TISO MVP is Sonja Vasic from Serbia.
Sonja, thank you so much for being here with us today. We saw you smiling in this video. I saw you smiling watching this video. What memories does it bring back?
Thank you for having me, Chloe. Obviously, just the best memories. I mean, the whole journey with Serbia national team was amazing, but the last summer really put the dot on it. And I think it's basically the pathway that we show to all other smaller countries that if you put the work in and you believe it, the miracles can happen. And we put really Serbia out there on the map as a contender in a women European basketball, but also world basketball.
You also had a successful club career, but this national team always had a special place in your heart. Can you tell us what's different about playing for your country?
Well, I feel like every little girl dream about a lot of things. Their professional career dreams may vary from FIBA, EuroLeague, or WNBA, but one thing common is playing for their national team. And the dreams come true there. You know, you can see by the energy, emotions, devotion on the court that they always bring their A game. So I feel like that's really special to watch every summer, the Continental or the World Championships.
And you've played every summer since 2006. You went on to have an impressive career over 15 years. In your opinion, how has women's international basketball changed since you first started playing?
Well, I think it changed really a lot. I mean, obviously, we are talking about the 15 years, and in the beginning, I think the emphasis is on the physicality of the game, but I also feel like the social media had a big influence. You know, the young girls today very early can follow the best players in the world. They can see their tapes, and, you know, that just brings the differences. You know, now everything goes faster, everything is changing, so I feel we will be part of the change, even bigger that is coming in the future.
Well, thank you, Sonja. We look forward to it. Now it's time to switch our focus to the road to Sydney and the World Cup qualifying tournaments. They'll be held from the 10th to the 13th of February next year in Belgrade, Serbia, a city that you know pretty well. They will have 2 tournaments. There will be 1 tournament in Osaka, Japan, and 1 in Washington, D.C., USA. Now let's get a taste of the action. Wow, amazing action and emotions. We've been joined by FIBA Sport and Competitions Director, Mr. Predrag Bogosavljev. Welcome, Mr. Bogosavljev.
Thank you.
16 teams will be competing for a shot at the World Cup next year. Let's find out what they need to do and how this draw will be carried out.
The FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup 2022 qualifying tournaments are scheduled from the 10th to the 13th of February 2022. 16 teams will take part. Australia have qualified as host and USA as Tokyo 2020 Olympic champions. Both have a guaranteed spot in Sydney, but will take part in the qualifying tournaments. The other 14 teams have qualified from the respective Continental Cups played last summer. They will compete to secure one of the 10 remaining spots at the Women's World Cup 2022. The 16 teams will be divided in 4 tournaments of 4 teams each. 2 tournaments will be played in Belgrade, Serbia, 1 in Osaka, Japan, and 1 in Washington, D.C., USA. The top 3 teams will qualify from each group, or the top 2 for the groups with Australia and USA. For today's draw, the 16 teams have been divided in 4 pots, based on the FIBA Women's World Ranking presented by Nike. The 3 hosts will be immediately allocated to the tournament taking place in their country. The remaining teams will be drawn starting from pot 1. All teams will also be drawn a competition number to determine their position in the group. In order to preserve geographical balance and have a maximum of 2 teams from the same region in each group, the following draw principles will apply. In pot 1, Australia cannot be drawn with Japan, and France cannot be drawn with Serbia. In pot 2, Belgium cannot be drawn with France, and China cannot be drawn with Australia. In pot 3, one of the 2 European teams must be drawn in a group without other teams from Europe, while Brazil cannot be drawn with USA or Canada. Finally, in pot 4, Bosnia and Herzegovina cannot be drawn in the group with 2 European teams. And Mali must be drawn in the group with Nigeria in order to ensure that all regions are represented at the World Cup.
You know everything, the trophy's here, we're now ready to start, and we've been joined by one more guest who will help us with today's procedures. Gloria Losa, captain of the local Geneva Elite Basketball Club. Thank you for joining us, Gloria. Mr. Bogosavliev, shall we get this started?
Thank you. So we are almost there. Although the video perfectly explained the principles of the draw, I would still like to give some additional explanation on what will happen in the room today. So we will start by drawing the team from the pots on my right-hand side. Once we know the team, our software will calculate the draw principles and highlight on the screen available groups for the respective team. The team will always be allocated to the first available group according to the alphabetical order. And once we have the group for the team, we will proceed with the competition number for that team. So we'll repeat the same process until the last team is drawn. Before starting the real draw, we'll first assign the hosts to the respective groups, starting with Serbia. Serbia will play in Belgrade in Group A.
Serbia earned a ticket to the qualifying tournaments this summer when they won the Women's Eurobasket. They were 8th in 2014, their last World Cup appearance.
Number 3 for Serbia. Then next host is Japan. Japan will play in Osaka.
Japan, silver medalists at this past summer's Olympic Games and most recently champions of the Asia Cup, will be looking to qualify for their 9th World Cup appearance.
The number for Japan is number 2. And the last host, USA, obviously will play in Washington, D.C.
The USA have won the last 3 World Cups. They claimed their 9th consecutive gold at the recent Olympic Games in Tokyo.
The number for USA. Number 2. And now we will start drawing the teams from the pot 1. The first team for the pot 1 is France. France will play in Belgrade in Group B.
France's best finish at the Women's World Cup was in 1953 when they came in 3rd. They will be looking for their 6th consecutive appearance.
Number 1 for France. The second team from the pot 2. Australia. Australia will play in Serbia in the Group A.
The hosts, Australia, were fourth when they hosted the event in 1994. They captured their only title in 2006 in Brazil.
Number 1 for Australia. Moving to the last team in the pot 1. Canada. Canada will play in Osaka.
Canada is attempting to reach the Women's World Cup for the 5th consecutive time. They finished 7th in the last edition in Spain.
Number 3 for Canada. Now moving to the pot 2. The first team from the pot 2. Is Belgium. Belgium will play in Washington, D.C.
Belgium played at the World Cup for the first time in 2018 and came in 4th place. They finished 3rd in this year's Women's Eurobasket.
Number 4 for Belgium. And the last team from the pot 2. China. China will play in Belgrade in Group B.
China recently reached the final of the Women's Asia Cup. Their best finish at the Women's World Cup was in 1994 when they were runner-ups to Brazil.
Number 2 for China. Moving to the pot 3. The first team from the pot 3 is Brazil. Brazil will play in Group A in Belgrade.
Brazil won the Women's World Cup when it was staged in Australia the first time in 1994. Brazil will be looking to qualify again, having last played at the event in 2014.
Number 4 for Brazil. Next team from the pot 3. Nigeria. Nigeria will play also in Belgrade in Group B.
At the 2018 World Cup, Nigeria made history as the first team from Africa to reach the quarterfinal of the competition. They were Afrobasket champions this year.
Number 3 for Nigeria. Next team from the pot 3. Belarus. They will play in Osaka.
Belarus had their best finish at the World Cup in 2010 when they were 4th. They also came 4th in the Women's Eurobasket this past summer.
The number for Belarus is number 4. The last team from the pot 3. Is Russia, and Russia will play in Washington, D.C.
Russia was 6th at the Women's Eurobasket this year. They've played in 4 World Cups, making 3 appearances in the finals.
Number 1 for Russia. And finally, we are moving to the last pot, pot 4. First team from the pot 4. Korea. Korea will play in Belgrade in Group A.
Korea have played at every World Cup since 1964, having twice finished second in 1967 and in 1979.
Number 2 for Korea. Next team from the pot 4. Bosnia and Herzegovina will play in Osaka.
Bosnia and Herzegovina have never played at the World Cup. They earned a spot in the qualifying tournaments with the fifth place finish at the Women's Eurobasket this past summer.
Number 1 for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Next team, pot 4. Mali. Mali will play in Group B in Belgrade.
Mali reached the final of the Women's Afrobasket this year and will now attempt to qualify for the Women's World Cup for the second time, having last played in 2010 in the Czech Republic.
Number 4 for Mali. And the last team for today, the last team from the pot 4. Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico will obviously play in Washington, D.C.
Puerto Rico played at the Women's World Cup for the first time in 2018 and recently finished second in the AmeriCup this summer.
Number 3 for Puerto Rico. This brings us to the end of today's draw.
Thank you, Mr. Bogosavliev. Thank you, Gloria. And thank you so much, Sonja, for being here with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, the draw for the FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup 2022 qualifying tournaments is now complete. And here's the result. Let's have a look. In the first tournament in Belgrade, we'll have Australia, Korea, Serbia, and Brazil. In the second tournament, also in Belgrade, we'll have France, China, Nigeria, and Mali. In Osaka, Japan, there will be Bosnia and Herzegovina, Japan, Canada, and Belarus. And finally, in Washington, D.C., USA, we'll have Russia, USA, Puerto Rico, and Belgium. We look forward to seeing the world's best players on court early next year, and we can't wait for September for the FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup 2022. Thank you so much for joining us today, and see you soon.